All right, we'll get the show on the road here, guys. Let me just grab something to drink real quick.
What you want, I'll do it.
What's that?
What you want, I'll do it.
Oh, I got it in my office.
Oh.
Give me a minute, guys. We'll get this thing started.
I could compete with anybody in this car.
So is there a sign-in sheet going around? So we have 17 sign-in sheets. Let's start one up here. If you don't mind, just name, phone number, email. If you don't want to give us that, that's fine too. We just try to stay in contact. Email, newsletters, those kind of things. All right. So real quick, I think I've met everybody. Trying to see if we got any new faces. I'll go over some of the basic stuff tonight and make sure that you leave here with the information you need regarding what is addiction, what is substance use disorder, how do you know the difference, what is recovery, what are your options. I'll make sure I talk about that. And then also, if you have any questions or any other topics as we go through, please don't hesitate to bring them up, raise your hand, ask questions. I have a PowerPoint presentation I'm going to go through and kind of cover some stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about dealing with anger, dealing with resentment. I'm going to talk about dealing with or how to handle forgiveness. That's a topic that occasionally comes up sometimes where addiction and recovery is concerned, right? Right? Sometimes we do things whenever we're using that we might need forgiveness. I remember when I got into recovery, I'm kind of like doing my thing, and I was really convinced my wife was going to kill me in my sleep. I thought it was a very strong possibility because and I kind of say that tongue in cheek, but not really. And I used to tell people, like, if I don't show up to meetings, man, you might want to come over by the house and see if I'm buried in a shallow grave in the backyard. What happened in our case was, once I entered into recovery and I kind of declared that I had a problem, right? Because you guys know how this goes if you've dealt with a loved one. There's this tension and this kind of like, no, it's not a big deal. Everybody does this. People label that denial. People talk about the word denial. He's in denial. She's in denial. You go through this. You won't give in. You won't give in. But at some point in time, you kind of admit you have a problem and you go do your thing. And at that point in time, things changed for us. At that point, can someone turn the light on? I can't, that darkness back there, I can't see everybody completely. You guys will fall asleep and I'll take that very personally. And the middle one too? Bob, can you get the middle one too? The other one too? Thank you. Who turned those lights off? Was that you, Carol?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so what happened in our case was, once I said, yes, this is what it is, My story is, guys, it was alcohol for a long, long time, but the thing that really twisted me up, prescription pain pills. In 1999, I was in a car accident, and I walked out of the emergency room. This is in Western PA, where it's ground zero for the opioid epidemic. I walked out with 100 Darvocet, and just game on from there. And you guys know what that's like. It just gets real bad real quick. And so I say, okay, I got this problem. Yeah, I'm gonna do recovery. It wasn't perfect. It was one step forward, two steps back. It wasn't like a straight line, but I did eventually get it. But during that period of time, after I admitted I had a problem, it was an interesting phenomenon. My wife, it got worse. She got more angry because she knew all those times and all those situations when she thought that something was going on. What happened? She said, oh, ding, 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 they were going on, right? And there was this resentment and this anger that had to be worked through. And a lot of times you got to talk to somebody with that. You got to, family members have to go to their own groups and their own support networks. Maybe you have to get therapy. Maybe you have to get couples therapy. I remember finally saying to my wife, it is statistically impossible that every problem in this relationship is my fault. Just if you think about it logically, guys, in the universe of possibilities, every once in a while you're going to get it wrong.
Well, that was dumb.
Yeah, it was a bad idea. I don't recommend it. It was true. It was true because what happens is if you're in recovery or you're dealing with this issue, there's a term. We have a term for you. We call you the identified patient, and the identified patient is the problem and is thought of as the problem because why? Typically, you're in the middle of the storm. You are causing a lot of the problems. You are doing a lot of you are the one creating the issues. But when it comes to a family recovery process, or let's even take the word recovery out of it, when it comes to health and wellness and living a life that's worth living, you don't want to get into these situations where you're pointing fingers and you're blaming and you're labeling. That has nothing to do with it. What do you want to do? You want to be able to move forward, communicate with one another. You want family members to be able to sleep a little bit better at night, to have a little bit less stress. So it's not about whose fault it is and who's the identified patient. It's about how do we get through this? How do we move forward? How do we let go of anger and resentment, not to give another person a break, but to what? Have reduced stress ourselves. Do you guys get that? This is not, when I talk about this stuff, it's not like I want you to excuse anyone's behavior. It's not about that. It's about you being able to have a little bit more peace in your life. So that'll be the objective of what we talk about. This is who I am professionally, guys. I've been doing this for about 20 years. A lot of different settings. I've been at FAVOR for, believe it or not, this is our 7th year of operation. And so we are a little bit different here. We're a recovery coaching model, but I've done a lot of clinical work too. I'm a therapist, opened up rehabs, run community mental health, all that kind of stuff. I want to talk a little bit right off the bat, and we can kind of take as much time as we need with this. So if you talk about substance use overall, okay, a lot of people in America like to drink. Let's just put alcohol on the table. A lot of people like to drink. A lot of people in America like to drink a lot. A lot of people in America like to get tuned up. And they like to drink at a risky level. If you look at this, 31.7% fall into the risky use level. And that's a problem in and of itself. What does that mean? That means drinking too much, using other substances. On any given Friday night, something terrible could happen. If you keep doing this for the rest of your life, it's eventually going to take a toll on you physically. Even if you drink and you never have a major problem, you never get a DUI, or you never wind up in jail or anything like that, it will still eventually take a toll, just like any other thing, like cigarettes, for example, will eventually take a toll. And so that's about 32% of folks. 16% fall into this category that's been labeled addiction. This is the category of, it used to be called dependency, it's now called substance use disorder severe. This is a lot of what we talk about in here. And I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't make a across the board an assumption, but typically whenever things have gotten kind of intense and family members wind up at groups, it's because the person has moved down this spectrum. Does that make sense? Maybe they started over here, weren't doing anything, and then as time went by, it got to here. I'm of the opinion, I don't care how you label yourself or what you got going on, we want to try to help you no matter where you are in that process, because bad things can happen here just like they can here. The difference is, we would say if you're in that red space, that this is where the brain change kind of comes in. This is where the compulsion comes in. This is where some of those behaviors start to become a problem. But any questions about this concept or this idea? So if you're in recovery in here, or you're seeking recovery, remember this is a family group, and if you share, you want to share from a perspective that's going to help the family. I don't want this to turn into a recovery group. Sometimes that'll happen in here. If it does, and I cut you off, don't take offense at it. We just want to make sure we stay focused on the family getting the information they need from this. But any questions or thoughts about that part of the equation? One of the things that you have to deal with right off the jump if you're a family member who has a loved one kind of spinning out of control is trying to get them, you can't do this, professionals can do this, maybe groups can help with this, but to get the person to recognize maybe where they are in this process and to try to start the recovery pathway. We would say whether you believe you're here or not, maybe you haven't crossed the line yet, but start the process and stay engaged. And the sooner the better, right? So what happens, now the first thing I want to tell you is that there's a lot of work being done around addiction. There's a lot of work being done around substance using, and when does it become a problem, and why does it become a problem, and what does it look like, and there's different theories being thrown around. There's more research being done than I've ever seen in this area. For decades, we just kind of took what was said. You're this, or you're an alcoholic, you're a drug addict, you're this, you're that, and you just kind of like go off and do your thing, and here's the way it works. And it was a one-size-fits-all kind of model. That is not the case anymore. There are a lot of different explanations for why a person becomes addicted to a substance. So some of the most common, the first one would be a self-medicating model, like a co-occurring disorder model, a person who's depressed and is using to try to cope with depression, a person who's anxious and is using to try to cope with anxiety. That's one concept that's out there you're hearing a lot about. The second one that maybe even more common than that would be trauma. That using substances and using substances addictively is a way of trying to deal with trauma. So if I was physically abused and when I drank, I was able to forget about that, you can see the payoff, right? And then the third model, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, is this brain change around dopamine, around this neurotransmitter called dopamine. This is the most common model. This is the thing that they teach in rehabs. This is the thing that they teach to psychiatrists. This is technically the 12-step model is trading on this theory as well. It's called reward deficiency syndrome. And basically, you're born with or your early experiences produce a circumstance where you don't have as much dopamine in your brain and you're drawn towards substances because there's a huge payoff. Dopamine allows you to experience pleasure. If you are hungry and you eat, dopamine is released. If you have a good conversation, dopamine is released. It's the payoff. It tells your brain, go do that again. Do you guys get that part of it? So the neurotransmitter dopamine exists, and it happens to everybody on the planet. Everybody, and it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But it's not about getting high. It's about getting content. It's about feeling okay, not feeling high. And the problem is, if you don't have enough transmitters, technically receptors is what the problem is. If you don't have enough receptors, you can't feel content. Is this making sense? And if you can't feel content and you find a way to feel content and it's a substance, what are you going to be drawn to? You're going to be drawn to the substance. Do you get? And again, let's go on the record that anybody doing anything long enough can become addicted. You don't have to be born with this to become addicted. This is just the most common model. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Because anybody doing anything, take the person who had no trauma, take the person who has no depression, no issues with dopamine, and if you give them enough of a substance, eventually they're going to wind up there. The other thing I want to go on the record and tell you is the number one indicator of whether or not you'll have a problem is age of first use. How old you are when you first started, okay? All right, so let's go through this. This is, you're walking around at a 10. This is a normal person. They haven't experienced major trauma. They haven't experienced major co-occurring disorders. They're kind of functioning normally. They can experience the day. They go to the lake and they go fishing, and it doesn't involve alcohol. It doesn't involve drugs. It's just fun. It's just a normal day. Hey, everything was great. Okay. Go to the birthday party. No alcohol, no drugs. Everything's fine. It's not yippee, but it's okay. Do you guys get that? I could never at all relate to that. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand going to the lake without getting hammered. But anyway. Okay, that's just me. You guys are a tough crowd today.
I was like, I relate to this so much.
So this is baseline. Your baseline. All right, now if you had trauma, or you have a co-occurring depression, or maybe you were born with less dopamine, less receptors, you're walking around at an 8 rather than a 10. And you don't really know that you're walking around at 8. This is what's fascinating. I think about my experience. I know for sure that this was me. There were 2 factors. First of all, I do believe that I was born that way. I absolutely believe it. Whatever that is called, I believe I have reward deficiency syndrome, or whatever the heck you want to call it. The second thing was I experienced early trauma in my life. At a very young age, I dealt with things in my home. I grew up in a home where domestic violence was present, and trauma and chronic stress will also lower dopamine. So I believe this is me walking around 12, 13, 14 years old, but not even knowing it. Do you guys get where I'm talking about? Like it's not like you're talking to people about this. You're just doing life, and you think that you're like everyone else. And everyone else is just also a little bit uncomfortable. A little uncomfortable in your own skin. You'll hear that. That was definitely me. So I'm doing that, and in my case, it was around the age of 14, and the first drug I ever took was alcohol. It was really a relatively nondescript event. It was just beer after a pickup baseball game. Kids back in the day used to do this thing called play outside. It was really weird, man. You'd go outside and you kind of like, you'd play this, you'd run around and do stuff. And so older guys in the neighborhood had it. I drank, and here's what happens. It's like, boom, you get this payoff. Because whenever you put chemicals into your body, it floods your brain with dopamine. So I'm walking around not even knowing that I'm not really feeling. All of a sudden, like life goes from a black and white TV to a color TV. And it's like, boom, wow, this is what I was looking for. But it isn't like love at first sight, not in my case. It's like every day I start doing this. But over time, the more you do this, the more habitual it becomes. And then the second factor is, guys, if you flood your brain with too much dopamine, the brain will back off the production of dopamine. The brain is constantly seeking homeostasis. It wants balance. And so flooding the brain with dopamine backs off the baseline. So I go from an 8 to 6. So now when I don't have a substance, I'm actually worse off. So now I'm even more squirrely than I was before I got into this. But I still don't know what's going on. But I do know where there's a solution now, don't I? I do know there's this stuff. And I've also probably got introduced to some other stuff along the way. I know that I can go and I can get, party, do some things, and I'm going to feel better, so I keep doing it. But I'm not getting as much of a payoff. But it's still working. But the brain backs me off again because danger, that's too much at one time, back it off. The analogy is if you go home tonight and your toilet's running, you're going to turn the water off. That's exactly what the brain does. So it backs me off again, but I'm still thinking, okay, that's cool. I still know where this stuff is. But now when I go back, I can't even get back to normal. Do you see what's happening here? Backs me off again. I go, back me off again. And now this is what we classically think of addiction, guys. This is when the using moves. This is a party. This is, I'm trying to feel normal. Okay. Now there are other factors involved with certain substances. If it's opioids, for example, opioids after a certain period of time, you develop a physical dependence, right? So you're going to have withdrawal syndrome on top of that. And then there's also just normal kind of environmental habitual things like triggers and cravings and cues that you got to deal with that make this like even more difficult to deal with. But this process here is the compulsion. This is the desperate, crazy behavior that goes on. This is me going to bed at night and saying, I'm never doing that again, and then waking up and feeling like this the next morning and not knowing why I'm feeling this way, and then all I can think about is to try to get a hold of something. It becomes all-consuming, okay? And that's why if you have somebody in your life or you've dealt with this yourself or whatever the situation is, and the crazy stuff is going on, I can't believe he would do that if he knew, that he was going to get kicked out of the house. I can't believe she would do that if she knew that the worker was going to take the kids away. All that stuff starts to happen, and that's when it becomes addiction. So, and what it looks like is this. This is what it looks like. Now again, I am not making excuses for anyone. This is not to say that the bad things that go on are okay, right? That is not what this is about. The bad things that go on are the bad things, and people need to be held accountable, and we need to find a way to deal with that. But this is the reality of what's happening. So this is what it should look like This is like full firing. This is a normal person walking around experiencing life live and in living color. This is what it looks like after you've been abusing substances, after the dopamine is shut off. And this is the evidence, if you will, of the dopamine deficiency. This is the evidence of the brain change. Now, again, remember, there's more involved. It's not that simple, but this is meant to try to get you in touch with the idea that there's more to it than a person just making a choice. There's more to it than Rich waking up in the morning and trying to figure out how he's going to screw up somebody's day. Yes?
So when you say the one on the left is after whatever use it is that over a certain amount of time? Is that showing, someone went out and partied last night and really got it on and that's...
No, it will take a little bit of time, and nobody can say exactly how long it takes. This wouldn't be one time. This would take repetitive exposure. It depends on what the substance is. Certain substances are more addictive than others. There's no doubt about that. I'm telling you, like the age of first use, man. If there's any information that the world needs to know, if kids can wait till they're 21, they're like 95% less likely to develop a problem. Your brain is not ready for the flooding. Your brain is not ready for this, okay, when you're 14. It's never good to do it, but like when you're 14, it's your brain is growing. It's like you have no protection. Did you have a question?
Yes. Is dopamine a nerve receptor like crystal meth? Acts on the nervous system?
So everything acts on, everything in the brain it's not actually chemicals. Like the idea of a chemical imbalance is very misleading. It's actually electronic impulses between cells. And so any substance you put in, or even food or whatever it is, or really even interactions, releases electronic impulses.
Right.
And so that's the process there. It's just that you're able to identify certain ones that you want to study.
Okay.
Now, crystal meth and heroin and pills and marijuana, they all release dopamine.
Okay.
Now some of they release other things too, like norepinephrine, epinephrine, that kind of stuff.
Well, I think of an opioid as a downer kind of thing, and crystal meth as a stimulant.
Well, they are.
So
They are because of the effect that it has outwardly. But in terms of the brain, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Okay.
Do you guys get that? It's a great question. Like, it's not like crystal meth releases a different type of dopamine. It's the same thing. And the truth is, it's the same dopamine that is if you eat chocolate cake. You get that part? Like, it's the same dopamine if you gamble.
It's the pleasure.
It's the same dopamine if you go shopping. That kind of stuff. Yes?
On the dopamine, over a period of time, does the normal supply just stay at a low?
No, it comes back. The other good part of this is that you make it come back. After you, and there are factors that contribute to how soon you make it come back. Things like being around other people really, really seems to help. What you put in your body in terms of what you eat and whether you exercise, prayer, meditation, therapy seems to help. There are things you can do, but this isn't permanent. This isn't a permanent shut-off valve. Although I've known people who stayed pissed so long that you think it might have been, but it isn't. It really isn't. Were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that my daughter said that the withdrawal from opioids is different than the withdrawal from meth.
That's because you're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not withdrawal, guys. This is a psychological process that happens with dopamine. Physical withdrawal is a whole nother ballgame. Physical withdrawal is your body, not your brain, your body acclimates to having it in the system. And when you pull it away, you get sick. So the opioid withdrawal would be completely different than the methamphetamine in that regard. And the truth is, methamphetamine doesn't really even have withdrawal. You can't even get treatment for methamphetamine withdrawal. Really, the only thing methamphetamine will do is sleep, go sleep, you'll crash. Opioid withdrawal is very, very, like, we just talked about this. It's like the flu times 1,000. Your skin is crawling, you can't sleep, your nose is running. It's very hard for me to explain what that's like. It's very hard to put into words. It's hands down the worst experience that I've ever kind of gone through. But that's different than the brain stuff. That's the body stuff. This is the brain. You guys get that? It's a great question. And you really need to be aware if your loved one is dealing with methamphetamine and you can't, it's really hard to even get them into a detox center. Because basically what they'll be told is, we can't really do anything, you're just going to kind of go to bed. You're going to crash. Now, there are like they still are detoxing people for opioids, but you guys will probably like start to have this experience. You'll start to see that they're starting to deny detox for opioids as well, and they're saying that that we want you to do medication assisted treatment. That's the push on the insurance end, and it doesn't come down to insurance except for what, who's going to pay for it, right? And so you wonder who makes the decisions. That's probably a conversation for another time, though. Any other thoughts about this part of the process? Yes?
Are there normal ways of getting that high? I mean, that
Dopamine. There are normal ways to get dopamine in your brain. So exercise, prayer, meditation, what you eat. There are certain things that lower dopamine. Like one of the biggest bummers is caffeine is not good for dopamine. But I'm never going to not drink caffeine. I'm going to hammer caffeine. But technically, if you stop drinking, sugar is not good for dopamine. You know, sugar releases it, but it's not good for stable levels. Does that make sense? You want stable levels of dopamine. You don't want spikes. You don't want these ups and downs.
That just answered my question.
Yeah, you would prefer, and also being around other people releases dopamine. Remember what dopamine's all about. It tells your brain that was good, do it again. So you're hungry, you eat, that was good, do it again, because what? That'll help you survive. You're around other people who make you feel safe. That was good, do it again. And so being in groups would help with dopamine. People always say, when I do this presentation at recovery meetings, it's funny because somebody will say like, well, isn't there like a pill that'll fix that? I'm like, yeah, it's called Oxycontin, and it's not going to go well, you know. And this is really. I'm now giving you my personal take on this because of my personal experience, and you probably line up 100 people, you might get different feel. This is 100% like the challenge. This is my challenge now. I know that even though I have gotten into recovery, I still am below that baseline. Because remember, that's one of those things that is a condition that was there before the addiction came in. Does that make sense? So it's not like all of a sudden I'm in recovery and I'm here every day. I still feel restless. I still feel like what's next? Like what's out there to entertain me? This is also the little kids like that get. You hear a lot about like ADHD and stuff like that. It's tied to this as well because these are the kids who. What's the next thing? This is the kid who wants to jump off the roof into the pool. You know, yes.
When you just brought that up, like when I was growing up personally, as soon as I hit 6th grade at the age of 11, this is when the big ADHD and ADD was coming into the picture of. A lot of psychiatrists were prescribing families with Ritalin, 50 milligrams, Adderall, Vyvanse wasn't out yet kind of thing, but that was my first experience personally was all of a sudden like I was just this wild ass kid trying to enjoy life, and now I'm told that I have to sit there and be put on this stuff that turns me into a complete zombie.
Yeah.
Which all tense, can't eat. I'm not the same person around my friends, family, or anything of the sorts like. But I'm expected to take this every day. Yeah. Kind of thing. I mean, and
you get into a situation where, if you look at what could be going on there. So and again, some of this is theory, right? Like some of this hasn't been proven, but there's a lot of folks that say like the reason you couldn't sit still is because you were just sort of here and you just weren't feeling it. You needed, what's next? I need to do something. It isn't a bad thing to be compelled into like what the next activity is. But in our world, you got to sit like in school. What do you got to do? You got to sit in the desk and don't make the teacher's job hard.
Yeah.
So now you get evaluated and you wind up getting. The real downside is what's interesting is that ADHD actually does exist. It's not like it's an illegitimate diagnosis. It's just not as wide as it's been promoted.
Yeah, I was like forced into taking this, like.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, to sit still, and think about what you got to do when you're in school. It's like you're kind of like in a factory, sort of. You literally sit still until what? The bell rings, and then when the bell rings, you're allowed to move. And then you start to get into situations where, like, is that fair to label certain kids that way? I don't think it is. Now, I also know, though, that even if you take, like, Ritalin, for example, or any of the stimulants, they also blow you out with dopamine. I mean, it's a recreational substance for some people, right? It's and a lot of other substances fall into that central nervous system stimulant. So the deal is some people, not every single person, but some people who fall into this category will start using these substances and their brain will make a shift. Okay, and it seems to be between 10 and 15%, depending on what study you look at. It's not going to happen to the majority of people. Okay, just like the person who eats too much sugar, not every person is going to get diabetes, are they? But a certain percentage will. That's exactly what we got going on with addiction or substance use disorder. No way to tell who it's going to happen to and who it's not going to happen to. I wish there was. Why did it happen to me? Why did it not happen to my brother? Why did it happen to George, not Steve? I mean, you could ask these questions all day, right?
Do you think someday there will be a test?
I think that I don't know what they would test for or how they would do it. I think if there's other chronic diseases where they haven't figured that out. Here, you want to know the truth on what I think? And to a certain degree, I don't know if I should stand up here and say this to y'all.
Move away from the phone.
No, at least I'll say it. So much of what we do with addiction and with mental health is called intuitive medicine. Meaning we really don't know what the hell is going on, and we're not sure what's actually going to work. If you want the truth, we have some evidence on what works to a certain degree but it's such a small slice of the pie that I feel like there's a lot we need to learn, Carolyn. And if you want, I feel like, are they going to come up with something like that? They could, but there's just so many other things. Like, for example, just like there's many different varieties of cancer, there are many different varieties of addiction. Not just based on the substance, based on the person, based on their background. We just have simply never put any money or research into this because of the stigma. Do you guys get that? No one was ever going to take time to try to figure out what was going on with the garden variety addict, because that scumbag should just go and do what he's told and just, hey, he's lucky he has a roof over his head. Who cares if that therapy's working or not? Or who cares if that's the best approach? That guy did it to himself. Do you guys get? And so it's never been studied. The truth is, it's people have a feel, they have judgment. At FAVOR Greenville, that's why we talk about multiple pathways. If you come to one of FAVOR's groups, what you're going to hear is what worked for Rich, that doesn't have to be the way you do it. There is no, and understand, this is a fact, there is no one way to get better. That's a 100% fact. And all we care about is if your life is improving. I think that we will get better in the future of trying to figure out different ways to get this done. And identifying it earlier would be part of the process. Going back to what I said about, can we let kids know that they are 95% less likely to develop a problem if they wait till they're 21? Could you also screen people and say, hey, you're vulnerable for this, you have the predisposition? That type of stuff could be helpful.
A lot of people say that addiction runs in the family kind of thing.
It does. It does, because it is more likely that it will happen. It's about 40 to 60% more likely. But again, remember, if you're with your loved one, the message to them has to be keep trying. Do you guys get this? So the message from me to anybody who's trying to figure this out, I don't care if they're one day in recovery and it's their first try, or they've tried 20 times and failed before, I'm telling you, man, just come and talk to somebody and start thinking about this. Or if you don't want to talk to somebody, read about it. Start trying to figure out how you can start to put these substances down and lead a different life. And don't quit that process. Think about any behavior change that any of y'all have done in here. And it didn't even involve drugs. Think about changing your diet. Okay? Think about, I struggle with not eating zingers. Look, you all try not to eat a zinger. Zingers are freaking badass, man. I'll eat 4 packs in a row. That's 12 zingers, man. And so, okay, I want to change. Is it that I'm weak-willed? Is it that I'm lying when I say I want to change? No, that's part of the change process, right? That's how it works. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The problem with addiction is it's so darn scary that everybody, what happens? We flip out whenever somebody has a bad, and people quit. People quit trying. They literally are screw this, I gave it a shot, I might as well get my money's worth. That's the exact mentality that you want to fight against. Family members, you can't do it for them, but you can absolutely, you almost have to become the conduit for that to a certain degree.
Conduit for what?
for that message to be out there, because most people aren't hearing that message. The way the world works, guys, is it's been set up in a pass-fail exam. Recovery is a pass-fail exam. You're either in recovery, earning your days clean, right? And you count them up, or you're out using. And what I'm telling you is that you don't have to do it that way. You can be in recovery and still be using.
So what you're saying is
Hold on,
abstinence.
because I'm gonna get you. I'm sorry, Frank. I could see I'm a trained observer of human behavior and your nonverbal reaction to that. Your nonverbal reaction to that indicated that I was, not. And so here's what I would say about that. Recovery is a process, and you can be in the process of recovery without being off the substance. How would you do that?
Yeah.
You would be coming to groups.
Seeds planted.
Maybe you would be talking to a therapist. Maybe you would be trying to cut back on certain substances and really seeing, can I do this? Can I not do this? You would be trying to be honest with yourself. And if you keep doing that, it tends to stick. It tends to stick. 9 out of 10 people quit doing it, though. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but I also think it's dangerous in a way. Example, my oldest son has a problem with alcohol, had a DUI, had to go to ADSEP, did well. The last day of it, was told by the mentor, whoever, y'all did great. I know you're probably gonna go and have a beer or two, and that's okay. And I thought,
But your son didn't use because of that statement.
no, but it made it okay.
Now, we don't, here's what you're misinterpreting. We don't need permission to do it.
No, I know.
But and he would have been told a bunch of times before that to not do it.
Right.
What that guy's doing, and I don't know if I would have done it that way. I don't know if I'd have done it that way. But what he's doing is he's trying to get the people in that group to leave with a flavor of, we're allowed to talk about real things and it's okay, and if I have to come back voluntarily, then I'm going to come back because this guy was being honest. The problem with drug and alcohol counseling is, in order for everyone to feel okay about it, and I really appreciate what you're saying because I've went through this for years. I ran an adolescent program, okay, adolescent young adults, and imagine those conversations with parents. You could never approach anything other than what? Total abstinence. But every kid in the building knew that they were going to get high when they left. You follow? Every one of them knew. They were all there, going through the motions. And it wasn't until we started to have honest conversations that we got anywhere with that. But you couldn't do that. Like, you couldn't be in a room with mom and be like, hey, when you go out and smoke weed and Johnny, and then, because that's not going to work. You had to figure out a way to say it that promoted. The problem with counseling is we can tell people exactly what they want to hear, rather than saying things like, I'm glad that I completed ADSEP, I'm going to go out and have a beer tonight to celebrate, And the second part of that would be, if a person gets to a group, and I shouldn't make this assumption, but let's just say for sake of argument, if you get to a group, you probably have progressed far enough in your drinking that you don't necessarily need the counselor to say anything either way. Does that make sense? Where you're going to kind of like, I'm going to do my thing anyway. But it is incredibly hard. It's the hardest dance, and we've gotten criticized here at FAVOR Greenville. People think that like at FAVOR Greenville we're packing bongs at like the noon meeting or something like that. Oh, everybody promote use over there. That's never what we've ever said. I will go on the record right now and tell you, like, quit everything today, do it. Do you follow me? That's what I want for everyone. Do it.
I think the mind's made up before you start there.
And there's a process of changing anything. Think about how you change anything. Try to move off of drugs and alcohol. Think about something in your own life. Or you don't have to raise your hand. You don't even have to make eye contact. But have you ever known the right thing to do and done the wrong thing anyway? Okay? Like, I know some of you probably have. And so, how do you start to figure that out? And how do you start to get better at doing the right thing? You talk about it. You talk honestly about it, right? Can you actually make any progress? Can I actually make any progress with you if I'm just telling you exactly what you want to hear? Which in a drug and alcohol group goes like this. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I am done with this. I am going to go to 12-step meetings and get a sponsor and do what I'm supposed to do. And I'm never going to drink again. Even though in the back of my mind I'm thinking, no, I just was in a bad situation. What's more healthy? Do you follow? And how do we promote that? That's the dilemma. And it's not parents' jobs to do that. It has to become professional jobs. Yes.
But I also think one of the reasons they come to your meetings versus some of the other meetings is they know they can come here no matter what.
And you have to have honest conversations. Like I say all the time, I got recovery when I was 31 years old, and I ought to tell you, like the last 2 years of my active addiction destroyed me financially. Buying prescription, like, cause I didn't know my way around. I was a professional doing that. I had to buy all my pills from a pharmacist, and it was like doctor shopping. And the financial consequences of that, as true as I'm standing here, I still feel to this day. I would have given anything to figure this out earlier. Do you get where I'm? I would have given anything for a conversation that would have been like, hey, why don't you try this? Or have you thought about only drinking it? You know what I mean? But you couldn't do that. That's not how the world worked. You were either okay or you hit bottom and had a problem. In between, you didn't say anything. Matter of fact, you hid your head and you just hoped nobody would notice, right? So how do we get around that? Now again, is it a parent's responsibility or a loved one? It can't be your responsibility. Your responsibility is to read them the Riot Act, right? Like, I don't recommend that you guys use that approach with your loved one, right? You want to be direct on what your boundaries are and straightforward. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You can do it in a nice way, but it would be our job to try to figure out. And I don't think that was the best way to say that, but do you get the idea behind it? Yeah.
I just felt like it made it okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you got the person who's supposed to know
Yeah.
saying this. Absolutely. Yep. You should see what that's like if the person has a probation officer.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine that? Because the PO gets like, what'd you say?
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that guy said that.
Well, and again, I have to,
Take it for what it's worth.
well, and from where it's coming.
Yeah.
So sometimes
Yeah.
what he's hearing is not necessarily what I would hear.
Right. Right. Yes.
It is setting a boundary, right? Just like you said, I mean, 1 to 2 is supposedly legally safe. So
He was trying to do, yeah.
Set a boundary, because not everybody here's an alcoholic.
Yes, and that's exactly right. Not everybody in that group would have probably been in the same category, especially in ADSAP group, because ADSAP is anybody who got a DUI. So there probably were some people who might not have. And what he's doing is he's trying to like take that last moment to say like almost like a harm reduction kind of approach. If you're going to do this, for goodness sakes, be careful. It just if you probably want to pick and choose the way you deliver that, because I might have heard like, do you want to go out, counselor? Let's go.
Yeah, you can say something, but I'm gonna hear what I want to
Yeah,
hear.
that's right. That's right. That's right. So, yes, ma'am.
Well, they're probably saying too, if you want to drink, that's your preference. You got to decide on whether you have a problem or not with it.
Yeah.
Don't get out here and kill somebody drinking and driving.
Yeah, they're trying to like give information, and basically they're trying to do what I said. Like, instead of it being black and white, they're trying to find the middle ground. Remember, we were never trained on how to do that, guys. Like, when I got into this field as a professional, that is not what you were taught. You were taught there's one way to do this, like literally, and it is total abstinence. And as a matter of fact, not only is it total abstinence, you have to go to rehab. And as a matter of fact, not only do you have to go to rehab, you have to go to 12-step meetings. Not any meetings, 12-step meetings. Like, that was how I was professionally trained, and that was how the majority of people who work in this field were professionally trained. That is criminal. That is inappropriate. That is malpractice. Now, to go to the other extreme is not good either, right? The other extreme of like, hey, after my group tonight, make sure you don't get too hammered. Which bar are you going to? I'll meet you. You know, that's a little bit too much as well. All right. So, what other questions or thoughts about the brain or anything else I can clear up in this regard? Yes.
I was going to make another comment. I always kind of thought my son was crazy because if he was going to go in for rehab or detox the next day, he'd go out and want to do whatever he could do to
Yeah.
drink. And I thought, well, why does he do that? But I got to thinking about it. You know, he's not so unusual. He's just like me if I'm going to go on a diet.
Yeah, get it
I
in,
want
get it
whatever
done.
I want
Yep.
to tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty much the same type thing.
Yeah, and I think that you can understand if you've ever tried to change anything. Diet is a really good example, or even smoking cigarettes is a really good example. That is an addiction to nicotine. Like, you know what it's like, right? That there is a likelihood of slips, and there is a likelihood of let me get one more in, and let me have a good time, and I'm going to quit on Friday. I'm going to quit after the weekend's over, right? I'm I'm gonna quit smoking after the weekend's over. Why? Because I'm gonna live it up between now and then.
You always start a diet on Monday.
Yeah, and you know how many New Year's resolutions are started and stopped? Yes, ma'am.
So the dark left side brain, that's the brain, you say the body reacts differently. What is that brain acting like? What would I see?
So it would be think about it, it would be equivalent to like if you were really, really hungry, like if you haven't eaten for 3 or 4 days, it would be and you smelled pizza or something, it would be the craving and the continuous thought of it's almost like instinctual. I got to get a hold of this. I got to get a hold of this. I got to get a hold of this. It's repetitive. It's ever presence, but it's more than just like a desire. It's literally like a survival. It's equated with survival, and that's why all the crazy stuff goes on. That's why the person would act and do things that don't make sense.
So are we seeing blood flow?
No, that's literally what you don't see here. So
PET scan, right?
no, this is transmitted. The only thing you can measure are electronic impulses. So this means dopamine is not firing.
And it is.
It is firing over here. Do you guys get that? So that's what you're seeing. You're seeing no dopamine present, meaning what? No pleasure, no contentment. Everything's not okay. I need something. 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 And remember, you know what that something is because that's what got you here. And even though it's not going to work anymore, you're still completely obsessed with that. You hear people talk about it as like if your head was underwater and you were just trying not to take a breath, and then you did it against your own best interest. Yes.
So is that with the lights up? Is it after? Like you said, whenever people are with people that they trust and they get those neurons.
No, that's just present. That's like normal. That's you not being addicted. That's you just sitting there. Okay. And yes.
I just wanted to sort of add something for people who haven't dealt with addiction in the room. The one on the left, they've shown very, very similar brain scans for people who are smelling something like French fries, something like really craving a fatty food or something that causes an intense craving because that's something that the body needs. That's a high density energy source. That's something. It
isn't an abnormal experience to have cravings. Like cravings and the desire to get a hold of something it's what kept the species alive, to tell you the truth, and kept us moving forward. So it's just at such a magnified level. Yes.
Rich, you talk about the dopamine, and I understand that that's the reason for the addiction, is that they're looking for that next thing and that pleasurable thing or whatever. And this is reversible. What about things that happen to the brain that aren't reversible in the addiction?
So you mean like if there was a brain injury or something like that?
I'm just saying.
Addiction doesn't cause any irreversible damage. There's no such thing as like killing off brain cells or anything like that. You can have an accident when you're in addiction. You could probably do damage in terms of like maybe like physically to your brain, but it wouldn't be because of dopamine. You know, that's an important distinction. You'll see people with like traumatic brain injury. You don't make a comeback completely from that. And that's a whole different experience than what this is. The good news here is if you put it down and you kind of start a recovery process and you start working on yourself, you will come back online. Carolyn?
Okay, so once they came back online and then they relapse, is it a faster back to the bad picture, if you will?
Yeah, and again, this is all the stuff that they're going to learn, but it seems to be that it's easier to go back to the level you were at. It's kind of like, it's called kindling. And it happens, it's a term that's applied to mental health and to substance use. And the idea is that, you know, the more often you have a relapse, the more likely you are to have a relapse. Does that make sense? And these things literally pile on each other. So periods of stability are really important. There is no such thing as a wasted day in recovery. You'll hear people say like, oh, I was in jail. And I didn't, I only had, I have 13 months, but 12 of them were in jail. There's no such thing, literally, like when you're in that process of not putting it in your body, it's a really good thing. And so any time that a person can put together let me talk about a way to think of this. So if Rich goes out, if Rich is doing his thing, and let's go back in time, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm in recovery for 9 months, okay? Then my friends come to town and they visit me and I go out for 2 weeks and I'm doing my thing and I come back in, okay? and I'm in for another 3 months, okay? And people would say, well, you only have 3 months of recovery. You follow me? Which is 100% bullshit. I have, 11 and a half months out of 12. Do you guys follow me? I'm telling you, this scorecard game is really, really dangerous. It is not how it works from a factual standpoint. It's like any other disease. What happens? You start to get better. I have high blood pressure. I am a horrible patient where high blood pressure is concerned. I do not follow the directions. I have constant relapses. What happens? But every day where I'm doing the right thing and moving toward the right thing, it's not like that goes away when I'm not. Do you guys get this? So we got to get away from this like throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of mentality. I know it's really hard for families though, because I know that if I went home tonight, if I went out after this and got loaded and went home and said to my wife, well, hey, it's been 18 good years, 19 good years, come on now. Everybody slips up, you know, it wouldn't go well.
There is a progression to the disease. If I were to take 20 years and then go out in 3 months, I'm probably going to be as bad as I ever was, right?
There seems to be something that happens once you kind of cross that line or whatever you want to call it. Like the problem is, you know, that's why you want to get somebody back on point as soon as possible. Because here's the other thing: there's a huge difference between you going out for 3 days and you going out for 3 months.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the deal would be get it reeled in before you fire it back up.
Right.
But you are trying to start that thing off again. Like and I wish I could think of a medical condition that was similar, but I'm sure that there are certain conditions where once it happens, the organ or maybe like a broken leg or something. Once you get a broken leg, it's never quite the same, and it's probably easier to injure it again. Does that make sense? That's how I would equate this. Once you go there is something really wild about it, man. It's like, you know, you heard people use the phrase, you know, once a cucumber becomes a pickle, you can't go back to a cucumber. It seems to be that this is the case. But what's interesting is that's not for everybody, guys, who fall into this category, right? That doesn't mean everybody who's getting hammered has made the move, right? That means that's why we have to get people to self-identify whether they've gotten there. Like I identify myself in that category. That's why I practice abstinence. I don't take any chances because I've identified myself as having made that move. Does that make sense? But I identified myself as that. No one did that to me. I had to figure that out. Yes.
Do you think psychologically though there's something about going back and picking up the white chip?
Well, I think that I don't think that's an issue because I think that's a fellow. Like that's if you're part of that group, that's what the group does. Well, my concern.
Does that help them psychologically to be
Well,
starting over?
Yeah, I mean that's the theory behind it. Absolutely, it's like anything else. I declared today I'm going to get better, and I declare it in front of a group. And when I say something out loud, I'm talking more about how the professional world needs to think about this and how we need to think about services for people. Okay. So I'm not talking about groups. Groups going to do what the group's going to do.
Right.
Like that's a support group. But think about it professionally. If we believed this, what we would do is if we found out somebody slipped up, there would be somebody at their house. A professional at their house knocking on the door and saying, Frank, you know, I got a call from your mom. I got a call, you know, and I'm worried about you, dude. Can we talk for a minute? It's only been 3 days. Can you get back in this? That's what I mean. There should be medical interventions that get in there as soon as possible. It can't be the group. The group is gonna do what it's gonna do, and it's not equipped for that. Yes, it's a lot of times it's family. Unfortunately. It's almost like families have to become recovery ninjas in today's world. And I mean, we joke all the time about when is FAVOR Greenville going to break out the black van with tinted windows and just start like kidnapping people and taking them to rehab. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm telling you, if you figure out a way to like get in there quick when a person screws up, it is so much easier to talk to Rich at 2 days than it is at 2 months. Or 6 months. But we've been told, wait until he hits bottom and comes back. You see how we have this gap we have to figure out. One more.
A lot of the overdoses that I've read about or known about through my son, friends of his, a lot of them have been just slipped up once, and it might have been fentanyl and heroin or whatever, and then they died. I mean, so a lot of the
That's what makes it
slip-ups
even
is
more
very
serious.
dangerous.
Yeah, and that's what makes it even more challenging, because you can't. There might have been a period of time when you could wait that out a little bit, but you can't.
Right.
All right, I want to talk through a little bit around like the experience on the family end and kind of working through anger, working through frustration, working through stress, anxiety, all the different things that go along with this. This is not a walk in the park. You know, I've gone through things in my family. I know what it was like for my family to deal with me. This is not an easy thing to do. It's been equated to dealing with somebody with Parkinson or dealing with somebody with Alzheimer's. It's like it never ends. There's a book called The 36-Hour Day. It's not about addiction, but if you ever want to read something that I feel like really, really applies, you read that book. It talks about the exhaustion involved for family members who have to deal with this. Why? Because it just never ends, right? It's not like one crisis where Rich is in a car accident and you have him in the hospital and you're seeing what's going on. It's, you know, everything's okay for a little bit and then boom, something happens, and so on and so forth. And so it was interesting when I was doing some, I've gone back to get, I have to do these continuing education, get my license renewed, all this other kind of stuff, and I'm doing it on this thing called attachment theory right now, and they talk about 6 primary emotions. 3 on the approach side and 3 on the avoid side, and everything else we deal with in our lives fall into under one of those emotions, and they're anger, joy, surprise. That's on the approach end. The approach end means we move toward it. Okay? Why does anger fall into that?
Relatability.
So anger makes us move toward it because we're going to smash it.
Oh.
Do you feel, or I'm gonna verbally assault it, or I'm gonna show it what's up. Joy and happiness, that's obvious. We want more of that, so we move toward it. Surprise, we like positive experiences. We like exciting experiences. Over on this side, obvious stuff: sadness, disgust, and fear. These were the primary emotions. So if you were to take a minute and say, like, from a family member dealing with addiction, where do most of your feelings fall?
Right side.
So fear I mean, when you go through this and you think about like all the different experiences that have been described, fear at the bottom of it seems to be one of the most common kind of experiences. Do you think, is anger, do you get angry?
Very much so.
Do you get angry in the classic way, the same way you would get angry like toward your coworker, or is it a different type of anger?
It's a deep anger.
It's escalation.
So it's a deep anger.
But it's escalated.
It's escalated. It,
Anger at yourself, at the other person, at everything, everybody around you.
how do you know it's anger? How do you know when that it's anger? And I'm asking these questions. I have no hidden agenda. Like really, like how do you know that it's anger?
Cause you wanna
You wanna
smash
smack them.
You want to smack them. That's a good indication. If you ever want to hit somebody, anger is probably involved. Okay. Okay, and so if we walk that out a little bit, you literally, like, let's say you want to shake them, you want to smack them, you're angry at them. What are you angry at them for?
Stealing my stuff.
Stealing your stuff. Now this is where I think it does get interesting, because one of the things I'm going to talk about tonight is how do you deal with negative emotions? And the first thing is you got to identify the emotion you're dealing with, right? Would you agree with that? Because when I think of like stealing my stuff, or punching holes in the drywall, or taking the car out and wrecking it, that is when I think about anger. When I think about,
You're scaring the hell out of me.
I think about fear. I think a lot of times we want to put our kids in headlocks and we want to throw people through because it's fear. And it comes out as anger because sometimes it's hard to identify what it is. Maybe not. Maybe you're just mad that they did it to themselves again.
What about resentment?
And I'm going to talk, and anger ultimately leads to resentment. I'm going to talk about that. Yep. And so it's like anger that doesn't go away tends to lead to resentment, which can be really, really problematic. But what I would start to do if you're dealing with this is to really try to say, like, is this a fear-based response or an anger-based response? I want to kill so-and-so. I can't believe he did it again. Is it because he stole the car, she did this again? Is it because I'm just so pissed that I haven't been able to sleep for 3 weeks? Who do they think they are doing this to me? That's perfectly okay. Or is it fear, and I hate being scared like this, so I want to knock them out. Because if that's what it is, you got to work on the fear, not the anger. Do you get that part? The anger is just a symptom of the fear. All right? And the deal is, were you going to say something?
No, she's gonna
Yes.
take a picture of it.
Oh, okay, take a picture. Here, take a picture. Did you take one?
I got it.
Okay, all right. So now, and then, yes, sir.
Mother, I don't know if to discuss is what I would put up there, but I've done a lot of bad things in my recovery and such. And the one thing that every time I do end up slipping up, the one word that always catches me is that she's the one that feels guilty.
Yeah, and so this is probably going to be a primary one.
She doesn't act disgusted or anything,
Yeah.
but she always, I mean, she's the one that takes the blame. Like she feels like she's to blame, kind of.
Yeah, and all the things that go along with it, guilt, and all that, and then sadness as well.
Where does betrayal fit?
So betrayal wasn't on the list of things that they had under there. Where would you put betrayal? Was that could be anger?
I want to smash it.
It's kind of like anger. You know, again, if the litmus test is I want to smash somebody, it's probably anger.
You told me you were gonna do it again.
But at base level, it's also sadness. You know?
Yeah.
That we're at this point in life that it's set down. It's disappointment. I don't see that up there, but disappointment's part of it. But
Yeah.
sadness starts to play a role.
Sadness starts to play a role, and the reason why it's important to kind of like start to figure this out is because it comes down to this idea that you can control your response to any situation. You got to kind of buy what we're selling here when we start to talk about this. This is not an easy thing, but the idea of family recovery comes down to, you know, what, regardless of what the circumstances are with my loved one, I can choose my response to it. It sounds incredibly simple. It sounds incredibly like naive. It sounds like I'm trying to like blow smoke, but that's really what it comes down to. Because you can't ultimately control what that person's going to do, and you do have an opportunity to choose your response to any given situation. And we've talked about Viktor Frankl before, in super intense book called Man's Search for Meaning, where he talks about he learned how to do this in a concentration camp. Okay, now where he could choose his response to the guards, and he could choose his response to other people in the camp. He could even choose his response mentally and how his relationship was with God. Because the other thing over here is a lot of times whenever you, and we didn't do this in here, I do this more one-on-one, but people will say they're angry at God when they're in situations dealing with chronic illnesses. Not just addiction. You got any kind of chronic illness, terminal cancer, whatever it might be, there tends to be a leaning toward like what? Why me? Why in the hell is this happening to our family? You know, does that make sense? And so, can you choose when something happens, and again, you can put whatever kind of happens. You guys are all dealing with something different right now. Maybe it is a relapse. Maybe it's just fear because the person hasn't even tried to get better yet. Whatever it is, there's something happened. And you have an automatic response that you probably already are engaged in. You probably could write the script to it. I've talked about the script in my life, right? Where I would do something and my wife would flip out, I would flip out, wife would flip out, and what I'd wind up going to my mom's. Remember I've talked about the script? I literally feel like I could write a script. You may have similar things going on in your life. And what you want to do is you want to try to like find a way to respond differently in that space. Now I want to stop there for a minute and ask and see, and there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's very individualized. First of all, can you like believe that is possible?
Yeah.
Not that it's easy, but that is possible. It is possible to choose your response. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, what is the first step in that? What would be the first step?
Just making that choice.
So making the choice is the ultimate step. The first step is to recognize that you're triggered, for lack of a better term, right? You have to be careful because a lot of this stuff happens automatically. Have you ever gone through your day? I'll give you a really kind of like silly example, but you get in your car and you drive to work and you pull in the work parking lot and you don't even like remember really driving. You just kind of like went there on automatic pilot. The idea is we do a lot of these crisis situations on automatic pilot as well. We do our life on automatic pilot. We do addiction on automatic pilot. Families do addiction on automatic pilot. Even the craziness is on automatic pilot. So the first thing you have to do is start asking yourself is, where is my Achilles heel? What is my vulnerability right now? What am I dealing with in my life that gets me going? And that's going to be different for everybody in this room. And then if you do that, let's assume you figure out what that is, and when it happens, what is going to be your technique to stop? You've got to find a way to stop that train, to stop that automatic response. What are some ways? Let's pretend you identified the vulnerability. Let's say that the vulnerability is that every Friday night, your kid seems to do okay during the week and trying to get back into recovery, but disappears on Friday. You know they're not going to respond to text. Let's just pretend that that's the thing, and you've identified it. How do you stop yourself before you go into automatic pilot? What works?
Turn your phone off.
So that would be trying to control this, yeah. So you're basically, I'm going to not pay attention to it. Let's pretend it happens, though.
Not get mad.
Okay, so have you ever heard, let's say there's this woman, I can't think of her name, and she talked about counting backwards from 3. Okay? And now she was talking about when she was trying to make changes related to things like diet and spending money. And she would find herself, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know I'm still in early recovery, but in my earlier, what would stop me on Fridays from making that phone call was I would postpone it. I'll make that phone call in 2 hours.
So you had a way to tell yourself.
And then when I got to that 2 hours, I'd be like, okay, I will just call him at 7 o'clock tonight. And at 7 o'clock, move it on.
That's this. Do you guys see this? That's great. That's the plan. I'm having trouble putting this into words. But what has to happen here is, you've got to find a way to stop the reflex. You know how you're getting your reflexes taken and they hit you and it goes like that automatically? This is what happens with our brains. You've got to find a way to stop that.
So is it kind of becoming aware and maybe stepping back and saying, okay.
Yes, and then it's also usually a little like mental saying in your mind too. So the one that I was just talking about was this woman, and she has shown it to be incredibly effective in behavior change around things like diet and spending money and doing things impulsively. Literally, when the stimulus comes, she goes 3, 2, 1, and she tells herself, I will not do anything until I get to 0. 3, 2, 1, 0, and then she makes a decision. And what seems to happen is that redirects your brain to the point where you would be able to say, I'm going to call next week. You guys get this? The problem is a lot of this stuff happens automatically, guys. You don't even know you're doing it. You didn't even, you're pacing around downstairs, like wondering where they are before well, how did I even get here?
Cookie samples at the grocery store.
Cookie samples at the grocery store are great. Now you know, but another thing, people would say they pray, like they'll say a little prayer. Yes, sir.
Right along those same lines, you can practice daily, not just when you're feeling vulnerable. Things like yoga, meditation, practice.
That increases the likelihood you'll be able to do it.
So the buzzword for that choice is mindfulness. That's
Well,
a real cliche, but what it does when you're aware makes you be present with you.
Yes.
If you practice, okay, this is what's happening, and be right where it is in that particular moment. That's what they call mindfulness, and it's tricky stuff. But
and you can do things like daily practice that'll make it more likely in the moment that you do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You gotta catch yourself.
So the way that we were designed, the way it works from like an evolutionary psychology point of view, is we are designed to do everything on automatic pilot. It takes less energy, it takes less calories, it's easier to do life if you don't have to think about it. Even if it's bad stuff, you know what I mean? Even if it's problematic stuff. Yes, sir.
Sorry, one more thing and then I'll shut up.
That's all right.
I wonder how much of this stuff, this automatic responses, are because we're thinking about something else, not what's going on, talking about mindfulness. We're thinking about the future, we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about things we can't control at the time. How much of these automatic responses would we be able to control if we are in the present, if we are thinking about what's going on right now?
Yeah, and what do you personally need to do to be able to do more of that? And again, I think that's where it's probably very individualized on what's going to work for any given person. I think that the first thing though is to decide you're going to do that. Okay, because what happens to many, many people who come to groups like this, and not just this group, but they come and they hear this stuff and they think in the back of their mind the whole time while I'm talking, yeah, but that's kind of bullshit because my guy is having this go down, and yeah, I really won't be happy until so-and-so's in rehab, and yeah, this will never happen if that's where you're at with it. The first thing you'd have to say is, I will accept the possibility that my life will be better if I start doing this. Not that my loved one will be in rehab. Or not addicted anymore. Do you follow what I'm saying? Like, that's a straw man, that's a sucker's choice right there. Because that doesn't exist for, guys, that doesn't exist for life, period. Do you get that? Like we can't be okay when everything we care about is okay. We can't wait for that. Does that make sense? It just will never work. I've gone through that in my life. Outside of addiction, outside of the mental health crisis I went through with people that I love, like, outside of all that, if you literally are waiting till the circumstances are, I'm going to be cool when he has 90 days. Or I'm going to be cool when he has 6 months. Or I'm going to be cool when he gets out of the basement. Or I'm going to be cool, whatever it is. As soon as that happens, something else is going to pop up. And if it's not addiction, you know what else is going to pop up? It's going to be something you can't even think of right now. It may be, it's going to be a whole nother health issue, or it'll be a financial. This is, you have to make a decision that I am going to become a pro at running my mental health and stress. I am going to do everything I can at any given time on any given day to not lose my shit. Okay? That could be your mantra. I'm going to do everything I can on any given day to not lose my shit. And then but also I respect you if you're not there. Because understand, when I came to these groups and when I went through what I was going through, I didn't buy any of this stuff. I didn't buy any of it. I thought it was all 100% bullshit. Okay? What happened was I just literally couldn't do what I was doing. Do you follow what I'm saying? Like, this was not working anymore. There weren't enough pills anymore. Everybody hated me. Life was completely out of control. So you know what? I didn't believe any of this stuff. In my case, it wasn't this. It was things like the steps. It was things like daily meetings. It was things like sponsors. That's what I used. I didn't believe any of it, though. I just believed the way I was doing it wasn't working anymore. Do you follow me? If what you're doing is working, keep doing it. I suspect, though, it needs tweaked a little bit if you're here. So, because you'll figure this out. I am 100% confident you'll figure out first thing you'll figure out is, what do I need to avoid? Right now, there's a list of 50 situations you put yourself in where you're literally like your own worst enemy. You're making a call to find out what's going on when you shouldn't. You're paying a bill that you shouldn't. You're asking questions that you really don't want to know the answer to.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one.
Yeah. So there's things you can take off the table right there, and then if you can get to here where you pause for a minute, most of you will make a better decision. Most of you will make a better decision. Yes.
Pause when agitated is a game changer.
Pause. If you can pause at all, I feel like pause when agitated, sometimes even pause when excited, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Because it's this idea of, can we just try to be a little bit intentional about this, especially if you identify bad stuff, bad situations. Now, resentment and anger is one category for this. It's a very common kind of thing. People, and maybe this is, Carolyn, kind of like what you were talking about, people will get angry, they'll get resentful. There's adrenaline involved when that's going on, but it is not, you actually are acting against your own best interests. I'm going to take the person out, or I'm going to put them in their place, or I'm going to show them what's up. Let's even talk about related to boundaries. Let me finish this idea real quick. So let's say it's related to boundaries with a child or with a spouse or whatever. Yeah, the boundary needs to be set. But if you do the boundary out of anger, that's not good either. Because it's all about, I'm going to show somebody what's up. I'm going to show them and that is actually not good for you. You guys get this? This isn't about being kind and soft to other people. That's not good for you. Yes?
So you said said, don't ask questions you don't wanna know the answer to, but you don't wanna be ignorant.
Well, I'm not. I just said I use that as an example. Sometimes you do need to ask the questions.
Right, they're
You
probably
know?
not gonna tell you the truth anyways.
Yeah.
What you gonna do with the answers?
Yeah, they're liars.
There are some situations I've been observing lately, especially with families when I'm getting them together, where like there's just too much information going on. Like honestly, like they're asking questions like it has nothing to do with boundaries. There's nothing they can do about it, and they're just finding out way too much about what's going on the weekend. Does that make sense? And that's why I said that. But I'm not saying sometimes you do need to know. Do you follow me? Sometimes you have to take your own individual situation into account. And there's a couple different things that people will do out of anger and out of resentment. And again, both equally problematic. One is I'm going to show them by like removing them from my life, which might be necessary from a boundary standpoint. But if you're doing it in a vindictive way, that tends to backfire on people. And you can do it even when you're around them. Patronize people, ignore people, not talking to people, you don't want to react emotionally. If that's where you're at, if you need to have space, you want it to be like, hey, Rich, listen, we just can't talk anymore every time we talk. You don't want to do it out of anger. And then the other thing, of course, is attacking people. You try to get even, humiliate, intimidation, straight up rejection. Again, this could be for anybody in any situation. You have to apply it to your loved one. And then you attack them in your head over and over again. How many people have done this with a resentment? How many people have had the conversation, they've had the whole like movie scene in their mind. Here's what I'm going to say. And then it's like you're just on this hamster wheel. And you literally can't escape this. You're in your car, you're driving home, and you're thinking about what they said, what you should have said, what could have happened, what you wish you would have done differently. Like, I can't believe they said. And this may not even be your loved one in addiction. This may be your mother-in-law who said something rude to you about your loved one in addiction. You know? Anybody ever? You guys know what I'm talking about with this? And then you're like, if they, I should have said that. Well, if I'd have said that, then they'd have said, oh, then I'd have said that.
The person that says it's not a disease.
Well, and it's exhausting, guys. If you this can get exhausting. You know, it starts with, I can't believe that she would say that. I can't believe he would do that. Do you believe he used again? Do you believe he lied to me? Do you believe he won't go to meetings? Then it's like, I will do this, or I should do this, and boom, it's a runaway train. It has now left the station, okay? And it ain't stopping, man. And then you're like, well, this is what they're gonna do when I do this. Well, they're gonna say this. Well, then I'm gonna do that, okay? And it's just like, you guys, have you ever been here?
Yes.
This sucks.
Pacing the floor.
Pacing the floor, not being able to concentrate, pretending like again, I could get you in the car and you could drive to work. You wouldn't even have known where you drove to. You just, all of a sudden you're there because they've totally taken you out of your life. The person has, the situation of the person has totally taken you out of their life. That is not, this is again, going back to, you have a right to live and have a good quality of life, and this person is totally robbing you. Or a better way to say it is maybe you're robbing yourself. Yes?
What do you do when you have family members or friends that can't distinguish between illegal drug addiction and legal drug addiction?
You mean like alcohol versus drugs?
Well, no, like, I had a niece that my sister would have slapped me into me week if I said it to my brother-in-law. I said, you know, your daughter isn't any different than mine.
Oh, because
other than the fact that she's using legal drugs and mine is using illegal drugs.
It's all gonna fall under here, and it's gonna frustrate the heck out of you. And so what you do is you literally start to ask yourself, do I even want to be in these relationships that cause this? Maybe I've shared in here openly about family relationships I've cut off because of that type of stuff.
Take a break from it.
I will not do it. I will not do it. I will not be in a room with somebody who makes me feel like that. Because why? Because he's my brother or she's my sister or whatever. I'm not saying I'll give them like one chance and you're out. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll give it a good try. And I will always go for Thanksgiving because my mom wants me to. Which I don't get that, but whatever. You know, and so I will always be there and I'll be cool and I won't talk, any kind of smack to them. But because I can't deal with it. if I was in a situation with a family member or a friend and they were judging me and they were popping off, and I would go right there in my head, and this would be me all night. I would just be, and they're going to go to sleep and have a good night. In the meantime, I'm like, do you believe he said that? Do you believe she said that? I would recommend, we've talked about toxic relationships, that you evaluate, if that happens too many times, you start to say, like, maybe this is something I need to cut out.
What if that's your loved one, a toxic relationship?
Well, then you're getting into all kinds of different stuff, because you're also talking about the brain stuff that's going on, and you start to make judgments there as well. That would be, and we didn't talk about this tonight, but that's where you start talking about, do you have to put together a team? Do you have to put together an intervention? Like, what do you need to do to distance yourself becomes a little more difficult. But it's technically the same principle. I don't know if you guys could hear the question, what if that's actually the loved one who's doing that to you, which could many times be it. It goes back to this principle of, how much can you take? How much can you put up with? And where are you at in the process? How long has it been going on? All these different factors. You'll hear people say, I can't take this one more day. Every time I talk to them, then you have a right to have your life. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of the word codependent. I'm not a big fan of it because I think it's a little bit misleading, but that's where the idea of codependency came from. That, Rich, I'm going to sacrifice my life, for this other person. But you have to think that through, and you have to be sure where you're at with it, right? Because a lot of times what happens, we make decisions quickly, we say things we can't follow through on. A lot of people in this room have probably dealt with that, yes?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think that there's a difference when, whoever said for the loved one, there's a difference between putting them down and telling them what is going to happen if they keep doing this.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
You have to be willing to follow through with whatever you say. That's the hard part.
Yeah, so it's like, so you can say something out of anger. That's what we were saying earlier. You can say something out of frustration. You're just a scumbag, drug addict, I'm tired of this, and you're doing this all the time, and this is getting ridiculous. Or you can sit and say, listen, I can't handle this anymore, Frank. You can't live here, okay? Or I'm going to have to leave. Like you say it, you try to say it as matter-of-factly as you can. It's really, really hard. It's almost impossible the first time you try to do it. And it's mean what you say what you mean, but don't say it mean. Mm-hmm. Those are the guidelines. And the mean what you say part is, am I sure I can follow through on this? If I say to Frank, you can't call me anymore, then I have to not take the calls. If I say I'm not going to pay, I'm going to not pay. Do you guys get that?
They usually say it's not about the argument, it's about the way you approach it.
It's about the message. It's the way you say it, right? Absolutely. And you guys know that. Think about, also, don't overthink this. Think about what it's like in human interactions in general. How do you want to be treated at work? How do you want to be treated, in your other relationships? You want to be communicated with what? Calmly and coolly and directly. Have you ever known anybody, so there's two different ways to kind of roll. Like you have friends, you have family, and if they feel a certain way about things, they sort of will tell you about it, right? Like they're kind of direct. Hey, I don't like that shirt. Hey, I don't like that. That kind of thing. That is okay as long as it's not insulting, right? Does that make sense? Yes. But what's even worse than even insulting is the person who lies and manipulates and won't tell you what's going on. Because why? They're afraid to offend you, or they want to try to control you. So they won't tell you what's up. They won't actually tell you how you feel. They'll try to move you around and manipulate and try to control you other ways. Do you guys get that part? I would prefer the first. I would prefer the person, say, here's what's up. But let's be real, that is not easy in general, right? That is not easy. It takes practice to say tough things to people without offending people, right? Especially if you're dealing with somebody with a brain disorder. You can't expect it to go well. You can't expect it to go well. It's gonna what? A lot of justification, a lot of rational, like here's what's going on, here's what happened. They're gonna say this to you, this will be said the first time you try to set a boundary. You need help. Mm-hmm. You have a problem, right? How many of y'all have been told you have a problem, right? Isn't that weird? That's like Addict 101. When we go to our first day of class, that's what they teach us. People in the audience are like, damn, they have classes for that? Holy crap, man. Yeah.
About like you talk about like a backlash reaction like that. You're sitting there and you say, you know, it's good to sit there and for someone to be upfront about it. What if the person that's being upfront about it has a relative the same problem that you do? They just have not confronted theirs yet, kind of thing.
Yeah, it happens all the time. There's even like a psychological term, they call that transference, where like you remind me of, and I'm going to put it on you. Absolutely, that happens all the time. You have to, in every relationship you have to like be asking yourself, how do I want to be treated? What is okay? And you have to give yourself a break as you negotiate that. There's nothing easy about figuring that stuff out, but make no mistake, that goes down every single day. It's now this is an interesting. This isn't. I'm interested in your take on this because this is some stuff I pulled up. It isn't necessarily 100% mine, but I do agree with a lot of it. There's some theories or ideas out there. Is like unless you're literally being physically attacked or somebody's stealing your property, or somebody's like taking advantage of you in that way, it's not it's not anger and resentment. Most anger and resentment is because there's a core hurt involved. There's an underlying issue. Does that make sense? You feel like you're being disregarded. You feel like you're being disrespected. You feel guilty about what's going on. It's not necessarily about the action itself. So when the person relapses and you act out in anger, it's not because of the relapse. What is it because of? It's the fear.
It's the fear.
It's the guilt.
Fear of not getting what you think you.
It's the fear. It's the guilt. It's the terror of what's going to happen. Does that make sense? And so the idea would be you have to get comfortable and you have to figure out a way to work through the underlying stuff. Again, I think if people steal your property or do something to you physically or something, obviously you're going to get mad. That's why anger exists. It helps you defend yourself. But you got to get to the underlying issue. What is it? What's going on? Why is that making you so mad? Have you ever seen anybody like react to a situation and you feel like the consequences don't fit the crime? Like the reaction doesn't fit the situation? Have you ever seen that in any part of your life? That's because there's something going on over here that you don't know anything about. That's because it reminds them of something, or there's a core hurt going down. Or for me with my kids, it is 100% a core message of things are not going to be okay in your family. It comes from growing up in the home that I grew up in. Nothing was ever okay. There was no normal, calm family time, right? We were just waiting for the next time my dad got binge drunk and beat us. So I learned what? The core message is lack of safety. Everything's not going to be okay. I cannot handle something happening to my kids. Like this is this tape that's playing through my mind. Now imagine doing life with that tape playing through your mind. And your daughter goes out and all she does is not respond to a text message. And I act out in anger. Is it really about the text message? It's about what? This thing that started way before her. And so what do I need to do? I need to go back here and deal with this. You guys get that? Now that is a process. That isn't like but I am telling you that if you can identify some of this stuff, and you can start to peel away at it, you can get to a point where you can accept and live with this better. Where it'll never be okay. It'll not be okay. You will not be happy. But you will accept and you will live with this. On most days you will sleep and your physical health will get better. Your mental health will get better. It is possible to live with a person in active addiction and be happy. It is possible to live with a person in active addiction and be happy. It's not like winning the lottery. It's not for a few people who get lucky. It is literally a process, guys, that you make a decision to do, and you start practicing, and you start working, and you start practicing. And here's the really weird thing, and this isn't why you do it. The really weird thing is if you do that, it increases the likelihood that your person gets better. These are facts. These aren't Rich's opinion. Carol?
I cannot, maybe because I'm old, I cannot read all those words. Will you read them out?
Disregarded. Unimportant. accused, guilty, devalued, rejected, powerless, inadequate, unlovable. These are some of the examples that they've used, to say this is what's going on underneath it. Don't get a resentment.
You need to make them bigger.
Okay. So out of everything, that's what I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go home thinking about how this needs to be done differently. Yes, thank you, Carol. All right. So listen. I really think that I want you to think about this as you go home tonight and as you're going through this. And again, you don't figure it all out in one night, but you start with the stuff of like, can I make a decision that I'm going to work on how I respond to these things, and I'm going to become less obsessed with what's going on with my loved one. Okay, even a little bit less. If it's a scale of 1 to 10, and 10 is full-fledged private investigator. Okay, you're going to go from there down to an 8. You're not going to get great at it, but you're going to work at it. And your life is not, the quality of your life does not have to be 100% dependent on what happens with them. And you're going to develop your own techniques and own ways to deal with this. But I'm telling you, getting to some of these core hurts, getting in touch with the idea that I cannot, and I'm going to tell you what did it for me. It was a non-drug and alcohol issue. It was that stuff I went through with my son. When I went through what I went through with my daughter, you guys know, you were here, I'll talk about it. She went through a crisis. She's okay now. After that went on, and that was okay, and then I realized that like anything can happen. When my son almost died, he's 6 years old, he's laying in ICU, and he has a freaking tube in his throat. He's 4 days in a drug-induced coma. I'm like, it became very evident exactly how little control I have over the health and welfare of my kids, right? And so I made a decision right there. I am going to live like obsessed, worried all the time, because I have 7 of them too. Let's not forget that. Dude, I got 7 kids. Some addictions die harder than others. So, or am I gonna do what I need to do to try to take care of myself? You see, it's an exercise in logic. So apply it to yourself. All right, we're gonna wrap it up for tonight. If we can get a moment of silence, guys, for those still suffering with this disease, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, good deal. Thank you, guys. If you need anything else, if you need any others, tonight, guys, we do have this call line. If you need any advice, grab that. It's really wise. Thanks, brother. Yes, sir.
Michelle,
You have a pen?
I left the building. Favorite book.
Go grab a pen out. Grab one.
Actually, I got one.
You have a pen?
You got a pen, brother? Oh, here we go. We got plenty of pens. Where we at? Right here?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. There you go. So how long has it been?
Loosening up.
May 17th.
Okay, cool. Good to meet you.
I have to get my joints.
Yeah, I
Does
think
it matter
you
where
did
it is?
that for me or something like that. Or maybe we just didn't see each other in a week. I don't know how.
I'll let you fill that out. All right, brother. Thanks, man. Good to see you here tonight. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you think they're using 100% sure, how do you decide when to have that meeting?
Are you doing it? Hold on a second. Are you doing it based on, do you have a re-follow if something's going on? Good to see you here tonight.
Well, we had told her if she left, that she couldn't come back to us and she wouldn't do it.
Okay.
So she just hasn't come back to that.
Okay.
But I've met her like at her work, she works at Waffle House overnight. I've been in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, she looks like she's not, I mean,
Yeah,
she's got
so,
the marks all
so
over
you
her
probably
face.
can't, so you probably can't do anything until she comes back.
Yeah, I mean, as long as she's staying with this friend, she's on
Yeah.
Easy Street.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
besides that,
The only
having
other
the
thing,
freeloader.
well, the only other thing you could do, and you'd have to really think about this, you'd have to talk to somebody like Michelle or you or the other thing is you are always allowed to change your boundaries. If you got worried about it from a physical health standpoint, you could always say, okay, you can come back. We'll sit down. I don't know, I'm just telling you, you don't have to, do not pigeonhole yourself in a situation where you think it's like, because you said it on this day, you just have to be on change, that makes sense? And you have to make sure whatever you change, because I have done it before, I've got situations where I get and the truth is, people your age, it's probably, and they will, especially if they recover, and they also, when you're that age, you yeah, but just keep that all in mind.
Okay.
All right, good deal.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.
Hi, I just wanted to introduce myself.
Yes.
I'm
Hey,
Tina.
I'm Rich. Nice to meet you. Is this your first time here?
Yes, absolutely.
How did you hear about us?
Our son is at Greenville Hospital.
Oh, okay. Did they tell you about it?
Yes,
Okay.
one of the nurses did.
Okay.
So he's
Okay.
still in the hospital. Gonna have to do some rehab because he lost some leg and arm.
What happened?
Well, Saya found him.
Is that, are you brothers?
Josiah, yeah.
So are you, what are you?
Sisters.
Sisters? Okay,
Jay
cool.
and Emma.
Okay.
My husband was here.
Oh, okay, okay.
But he started on the weekend taking, I don't know,
All sorts of
All sorts of things. Okay.
different drugs and alcohol. Just kind of all
Yeah.
climax to an overdose.
Yeah. Had he ever gotten any kind of treatment before or anything like
We
that?
did detox for a week in Kidman,
Where was it?
Carolina.
Carolina Behavioral Health. How old is he?
22.
22, okay.
And
Why did he lose, what do you mean is like, because he was laying on it?
He kind of passed out. Like he was trying to get to Charleston and getting all this stuff in his car.
Yeah.
And I had been telling him, William, you can't drive. I didn't know he was going to overdose, but I had been, because he was up that morning. It was
Yeah.
Monday morning. And I said, William, you can't drive. You're in no condition to drive. You need to like take a nap and like
Yeah.
let this get out of your system, and then you'll be ready to drive. I was like, no, I'll be fine. I'll just drink some coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
But like while he was getting ready, we were in the kitchen, and he just kind of like he was filling up his water bottle, and mid filling up his water bottle, he just like passed out on the counter, and I woke him up. I was like, do you realize you just passed out on the counter? He was like, yeah, I know. And then he keeps trying to get ready, so I just got his keys and I hid them because I was not gonna let him drive.
Yeah.
But I found him out in his truck, and he was
Oh, wow.
passed out like this, and he had been standing, and he had been out there for about 7 hours.
Oh, wow.
Because I was in the house cleaning, and I fell asleep.
Yeah.
And so that's why he has this, it was not nervous damage, but after standing in that position for so long, his muscles started to deteriorate.
right.
Your first impression
I don't remember.
So did he, so then he was get taken to the emergency room, and then that's how he was.
They medevaced him here from Salem.
Okay, is that where you guys are from? Okay, all right. And then he's at Greenville, like in Marshall Pickens? He's in the hospital. He's in the hospital. So did you hear from any of us?
Yeah, Sue came.
Okay, so someone did call
And
somebody.
I would like somebody
So this.
closer to his age or whatever.
Well, yeah. So Sue won't be his coach or anything like that. We have a team that goes into the hospitals. Okay. So, but you got to take this with you, and I don't know who else with you. And so, because here's the deal. He's going to get out of there at some point, right? And you say they want him to go to physical.
RCP's.
He's gonna do
RCP
2
set
to
up for
3
like
weeks of
work.
rehab.
Okay, well that's actually a good thing.
And then go to West Point.
Okay,
That's
that's
the
good.
goal.
Okay, you're good then.
And he's asking for that.
Okay, because the only thing I was worried about was sometimes this will go down real quick, and all of a sudden you'll get a call and say like he's ready to go. So yeah, no, you won't if they said that.
But I'm here tonight, and I drove all their butts here.